hoping that the work of this committee will effect some changes in the Constitution at some point, hopefully, I would like to submit two requests. One is that under Schedule 4 of our Constitution, where the Senate religiously allocates resources to the counties, there is a small omission in that our Constitution has envisioned urban areas to be devolved, but it is missing in Schedule 4. And what that means is that our urban areas are not getting any resources unless it is the money from the World Bank that comes in as conditional grants. And that is a big problem because our cities and towns are dying and decaying because of lack of investment. And number two, I'd like to make a submission before this committee that we need to relook at how we address the issue of marginalization. I think the way we marginalization, it is a little bit to the class of what we call the urban poor. I'd like to submit before that the urban poor is probably more marginalized person in Kenya. And we need to relook how we define marginalization, because if we only define marginalization based on areas, and yet there is somebody who is probably a meal away from starvation, person who has no basic sanitation, they actually pay to use ablution facilities. For someone who faces what we call the penalty of poverty, which is they pay 172% more for water than you and I. They pay up to 147% more for electricity. I think it is the high time we put focus on the urban poor. And by the way, they're a huge population. Chair, before I then get into the presentation, allow me to set a little bit of context. We all know the issue of the housing levy. At some point, I had to run to my good senior, Professor Ndongo, because I was confused whether we were actually debating a housing bill or the finance bill. And so all that sweating chair that you are seeing coming out is because I was...
You've become national, very famous as a sweating. And I'm happy you're talking about it because you're wondering what has become of Hinga.
Let me say, the Honorable President, that when I went to Professor Ndongo for some counseling, I was expecting some lessons in economics, but he referred me to the Bible. And he read for me Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. And he told me, Hinga, out of the sweat of your brow, you shall eat. So sweating is biblical.
Yeah, but the Bible seems to have helped in not sweating today.
Maybe a bit too early to call it. Chair, there is a very interesting report that was done by the World Bank in the year 2017. Now, like anybody who would like to make comments on the issue matters to do with housing, just get a copy of that. It's available online. It is called Unavailable and Unaffordable. And I believe this study painted a very good picture about the housing situation in Kenya. There are things that are indisputable. And I think where things become a bit murky is the how to solve. But there are certain things that are not in dispute. Number one, we are one of the fastest urbanizing countries in the world. We have over 500,000 people who are coming to urban areas every year. That is a fact. Number two, Chair, is that if you look at the percentage of what you call the urban population, at the moment, and these are very old statistics, 2019, after the census, we had about 6.5 million Kenyans living in slums. That is also a fact. So if you're adding 500,000 people every year in urban areas, when they come to those urban areas, what do they find? Chair, they find something which is interesting, and I know a professor here will back me up because of it's a lot more in economics. Chair, what you find is that we have very low incomes in Kenya. And where you have low incomes, and then you have got very expensive land, ordinarily then what happens is that rentals tend to be very high. Okay, low incomes, expensive land, rents tend to be very high. And so, therefore, your working class, I'm not talking about people who are not working. I'm talking about your working class, people who wake up, some even earlier than we do, to go to work. Don't the continent. So how do you have most expensive land? You have got very low incomes, and we get surprised that we have many slums coming up. So this is an issue that I believe should be able to bring all of us together, because it is ours to solve, irrespective of which political divide you come from. Even us who live in most affluent areas, you can attest that there is a slum next to where you live. And at some point, if we do nothing, a high wall is going to keep you safe. There will be a slum right outside your gate. And so I believe that this issue of housing should actually not divide, but actually should bring people together. I was privileged to be in the last government, honorable chairs, and housing was part of the Jubilee agenda. Also, housing was a core pillar in the Amio manifesto. As a matter of fact, where we ended, the Kenya Kwanza proposed 3% levy. We actually ended at where Amio had proposed 1.5%. So I would like to believe that if we are all genuine and we put away our political, we can be able to look at this matter of housing, soberly, and we can be able to agree. We may disagree, we may not agree on everything, but we agree have an advantage. So, Chair, I'm going to go very quickly to the economics of housing, because I think that is very, very, very important. If I was to avoid dealing with the merits of the levy itself. So I have a presentation, Chair, which is has 4 headings, which is a quick introduction, the economic context, the economic recovery, and then I'll go a little bit into the housing fund and offerings. Chair, the Kenya Kwanza government has a plan, and our plan is to have 1 million Kenyans owning their homes in this first dispensation. Now, Chair, the reason that number is not a thumbsuck, it is because in Kenya we have a housing demand of 250 homes. Yeah. The market is only able to produce 50,000. And of the 50,000, only 1,000 is affordable housing. So we have got 49,000 for the high end, that is a 3%, and 97% of Kenyans are left with the 1,000 that is being produced by the market today. So our plan is ambitious and bold, because we believe that we have a systemic failure in housing in Kenya. And for us to be able to understand how this systemic failure happened, Chair, you need to take a step back into history and realize that at the turn of independence, when we came up with the housing policy, we were the government building homes through National Housing Corporation, site and service, and that happened until the late 80s, when the infamous, when we got into trouble with the IMFs and the World Bank. of an economic meltdown of some sort. And this did not just start now. It has been there from COVID. We never recovered from COVID. We are in Russia. We never recovered. And we are having challenges because the economies are contracting. And when economies are contracting, Chair, the objective, the primary target is to make sure that you do not get into a recession. Getting into a recession, Chair, to get out of a recession is more expensive than preventing yourself getting into a recession. Now, Chair, as I said, the do nothing is not an option. And this is a case where you get presented with bad options. When you're going through an economic meltdown, when you look at the options that you have, very few of them are good options. Then when you take the context that our economies lack resilience, we don't have enough social safety nets so that when you have an economic meltdown, you can be able to send checks to the poor people and even to the working class who sometimes get laid off. Chair, we have a situation of dilapidated supply chains. So I don't know whether I'm going backward or forward. Okay. Then, Chair, I read something yesterday in the Nation newspaper, and I was a bit surprised by what I read there, because I guess trying to paint that this government has borrowed so much money, they failed to understand that part of the reason why our debt has increased, even without borrowing, is that because some of our borrowing is in hard currency, and our shilling has depreciated. Even without borrowing, the debt has gone up. So our currency is devaluing, we have high inflation, we have rising interest rates, we have uncertainty that is there in the market. Chair, we have seen in our own context here, we have got a huge unemployment issue, we have a huge youth bulge, we have our economy is around contracting manufacturing, we have had prolonged drought, we have had serious impact from COVID, and as I've said, even other places like in the US, where they are increasing interest rates to manage their own inflation, it is actually causing capital flight. If you look today at the stock exchange, the shares are misbehaving, and some of those companies have very good fundamentals, but they are depreciating. So therefore, Chair, I really want to make this point very clear that, sometimes to the public it looks like the policymakers, maybe we just sit down and we don't really apply our minds on some of these things. It is, I sat there when COVID came knocking on our doors. And when you looked at the options that we had, there was an inverse relationship between trying to contain the disease and the economy. And Chair, there were many examples. For example, South Africa went on to what is called hard shutdown. The effect of hard shutdown, you saw, was something which was called an insurrection. People got tired of being kept at home, and they went and broke into supermarkets and took all the goods. In Brazil, on the other hand, they assumed that this is like flu. Okay, so what did they do? They were relaxed, go to the beach, enjoy yourself, eat in home, tumeishi in home all this time. What happened? There were caskets that were being deposited at their state house because people died. So you're faced with very challenging and balancing situation. So, Chair, during that time, you are either going to go to austerity or you have got to increase government expenditure. Now, when you look at the Great Recession, which was in 2008, if you look at what the US and Europe did, they did the opposite of each other. The US went on a major capital investment in infrastructure. Europe, on the other hand, went on a serious austerity measure. What happened is that the US got out of the recession much faster. Europe, you saw the likes of Greece and all those other places they went, they had a lot of challenges. Another example, Chair, is in the 1930s when we had the Great Depression. And when FDR, then the president of the US, the strategies that he put, one of them was what is called the extended public works, which gave birth to something which is called the American Dream, which was predicated on housing. And build as many houses as you can, because as we get to the economics of housing, you'll understand why there was a focus on housing because of its long supply chain. So, Chair, sorry. So there are several strategies that can stem a recession under this condition. One of them is creating consumptive demand, encouraging spending, creating jobs in industries with multiplier effect. Now, Chair, and this is almost like a paradox, because you need to be spending where money is shrinking, because revenues are contracting. But you're saying you need to spend to be able to give people more money to spend so that you don't get into a recession. So, Chair, if you look at certain economies like the US, during this economic meltdown, what did they do? During COVID, what did they do? They printed money. They gave people checks. They did something which is called qualitative easing, which is they bought back their bonds. Why? Because they wanted to make sure that there is money circulating in the economy. Because when there is an economic meltdown, what you don't want to do is lack of that spending. And so, Chair, as I get now to the context of why we have put so much emphasis on housing, it is because in Kenya, we may not have the powers to pay those checks. We may not be able to have the kind of monies to buy back our homes. But there is something that we can be able to do. And what is that? We can be able to put checks in people's hands by having a deliberate plan that is focused on creating the consumptive demand, while solving a decade or a century-old problem of housing. And that, Chair, brings me to the issue of the housing levy. So, Chair, as I've said, our investment in housing projects helps us to issue what is called the stimulus check, which will make the required investment in housing, which in turn will expand enterprise and create jobs, and that will be to the benefit of the citizens. Now, it's important to understand why you want money to be spent, and especially when you're talking at the lowest level, which is the local economic area. It is because, especially when you're spending money at the bottom of the pyramid, that money tends to circulate around there. You see, today, if I gave my good friend Omar Hassan 10,000 shillings, he'll probably spend it. Okay, he may know he didn't partake some of those other drinks, so not a good example. But maybe those are two drinks. Maybe he'll go spend that money outside the country. If you put 100 shillings,
Okay, you can use up your one night.
That's why, Chair, they were not served tea. That brings later.
So, Honorable Wandai, I can see you after this, and I'm sure. Anyway, on a serious note, so Chair, the impact of spending money at the bottom of the pyramid is that money actually never leaves. It keeps on circulating around that area. You don't need to be an economist to believe that. But Chair, there is something that is important to understand, is that it's not like Kenyans live in open spaces. Kenyans have houses, but those houses do not meet the basic definition, what is in our constitution and even in the UN, of what is decent housing. And that is why I believe the issue of housing was in all the major parties' manifestos, okay? Because we have a problem. But Chair, to solve this, you need scale. Because it is the large economy, it's leveraging the large economies of scale that you can be able to produce the jobs that we want. Chair, we talk about manufacturing, and sometimes we talk about manufacturing in abstract terms. Question is, what are you manufacturing? What are you manufacturing? Because you must have a plan. What are you going to manufacture? That is why our plan, when you look at the long supply chain of housing, from this country we import hinges, Chair. Hinges we import. Now, I don't know, we can just look at this door here. And if you count, there are about 4 hinges on each door. On average, a house has 5 doors. So that means those are 20 hinges you can make from just one house. If you do 200,000 homes, you do the math. How many hinges are we talking about? And as much as hinges looks like something we should not be talking about in a national dialogue, hinges will end up being a big industry. because we have created the consumptive demand. That is the plan, is create the demand, then create industries, because you must manufacture for something. And so those who don't understand why we have really put so much emphasis on housing is because of the long supply chain. So if you talk about hinges, think of it, how many nails do you need in 200,000 homes? It's about 5 million kgs of nails. That's another industry. We have doors, we have windows. As a matter of fact, as a ministry, we have itemized 69 items. 69, 1, 2, 3, 68, 69 items that will be produced locally because the materials are available locally, that we are going to do at scale and create the jobs. So, Chair, this housing levy provides us with a capital to be able to scale. Because for housing, the kind of capital that you're looking for is what is called long-term capital. And we don't have investors who are going to come in with long-term capital. They start looking at risk. And what is the first thing that they look at? They look at a hustler and they say, the only thing I can see is this guy will never be able to pay. So I can never build a house for this guy. So that's why, what do? The investors, they focus on you and I. Because we have a check, we have a salary, and by the way, it is not everybody who has a salary that can afford. Let me give you some shocking statistics, Chair. And this could be dated, so we will look at the latest information. But as of 2019, Chair, 50% of all payslip carrying Kenyans earn 50,000 shillings and below. Actually, 75%, sorry. 75% of all payslip carrying Kenyans earn less than 50,000 shillings. So maybe since then there's been several increases, but that number is still what it is. 150,000, the Kenyans who earn 150,000 and above are 3%. So, if you don't have a plan, because of the low wages, and because of the high rentals and the high income, you're going to continue having slums coming up every day. So, Chair, that is really the economics of housing. So, what does that all end up in? 3 things that housing will be able to do. One is that injection, that money that you're getting, has a huge multiplier effect. Economists tell us that we can add between $1.5 and $3 for every 1 shilling we invest in housing. That is why we love housing. If you take maybe roads or any other infrastructure, that multiplier effect is not as high. The other part is jobs that will be created. And I heard a lot of people talking about Hinga anataka tu kujenga nyumba, kazi yake ni ya mjengo. You know, okay, mjengo is still kazi. But the reality is, this plan gets our manufacturing alive. And that is where the jobs are created. As a matter of fact, let me take you quickly to this slide, I'll come back. Because this really demonstrates what I'm talking about. I've just taken one product, which is cement. And let's look at the value chain of cement. Chair, I know maybe the whatevers are not very clear, but I start with the yellow tracks there. And they're not yellow because of Kenya colors. But Chair,
It is okay.
that is now, Chair, the cement manufacturing starts in quarry. It does not start in the cement factory. It starts in the quarries. So if we are going to do 200,000 units a year, we need 18 million bags of cement. 18 million bags of cement. We produce cement in Kenya. So we will have a lot of jobs at the guys who are in quarries. But then there is a guy who is excavating, there is a guy who is loading, there is a guy who is driving the truck. Those trucks, Chair, it's a huge economy, logistics. Those are new jobs you're going to create. Then the truck goes to the factory with the raw material. When you get to the factory, Chair, what do you find there? Okay? You have people who are going to offload. They're very different from those who are going to be putting it in the whole manufacturing process. And quickly, Chair, then there is another truck there, the red one now you can see. Why it is different is because this truck is not the same as the truck that took the whatever, the limestone from the quarry. These are different. These are new job that you have created. Then it comes to the construction site. At the construction site, you still need people to offload. You have your batching plant. You've got people who mix the mortar, and some of them you can see we use wheelbarrows, and they will carry the mortar. And the guy who's carrying the mortar is very different from the guy who is actually doing the construction or fabricating the panels. Chair, this is just one product, which is cement. So I can tell you, Chair, that the economics of housing makes a lot of sense, and that is just one product. And you can take any other product, Chair, and we didn't even talk about packaging. There is a whole new packaging because those cement needs to be in different packages as they get taken to the site. Chair, you know, we talk about Juakali industries and we talk about informal traders, and sometimes we talk about them in abstract form. I have had a chance to interact with them, Chair. And let me tell you, these are some of the hard-working guys, but they do not get a fair share of the shake. And I'll tell you why. We experimented with a group, or 3 groups, of Ngong Road, Kamukunji, and Karibani, when we did Park Road housing. We gave them 7,000 doors to do. Chair, we gave them to do doors because we know they already know how to make doors. These guys, that 7,000 doors came, including installation, came to about 123 million. That's probably the biggest check they had ever seen. But Chair, what is the problem? Is that they know how to make doors, but between them and the user of the door, there are about 5 people who each make more money than them. They are the guys who are having to fabricate the doors, but several people in between are making more money, brokers, than these Juakali people. So how do we then get the Juakali people to formalize? This is what we did. We gave them a contract to do 7,000 doors. It was 123 million. They did the doors, Chair, and I can confirm they did good doors. And they were paid. And Chair, 58 of them ended up being homeowners in the same houses where they were building those doors. And the final thing is, when they got paid, because they were informal, they didn't know about a guy called KRA. And soon, KRA came knocking on their doors to say, you owe me money. And so they came running to me and they said, PS, KRA is going to shut down our accounts because we owe them money. So I had to call the CG then. I told him, these are honorable people. They will pay you because they are still owed a bit of money, but midwife them because now they become new taxpayers. We are talking about 17, 18 million Kenyans who are today maybe not in the tax bracket. If we do housing at scale, we start to bring them into the tax bracket. We can't keep on talking about 3 million Kenyans and we have no plan. This is the plan to formalize them. Give them a product, give them the support, and they will be able to produce. So, Chair, this is the summary. Do housing projects at scale. You're going to create jobs, and you're going to have a very long cash circulation process. Because of time, Chair, if you look at the economics of 200,000 homes, that is per year, if you look at the numbers that I gave, if 200,000 homes at an average of about 2.3 million shillings a house, average, yeah? That gives you 460 billion. That is the cost. Out of the 460 billion, Chair, if there is a multiplier effect of 3 times, okay, it means that you have injected in the economy 1.15 trillion shillings. So the levy that we are collecting today, once we scale it up, we should be able to get a lot more money in the economy. Then, Chair, if you take the 10.5% of the Mjengo is labor, then it means that we will have about 48.3 billion of money going to wages. So we have got more people coming into the wage bracket, they become more taxpayers. Professor Ndongo is very happy because he's collecting more money, and we are building the nation. And then, Chair, if you look at the average number of formal and informal jobs, you can do up to 2.1 million jobs when you at the peak time. So those are the numbers, and I've given the assumptions there. Now, a quick summary of why then this housing levy. We look at it from 2 sides in financing, supply side and demand side. Chair, on the supply side, that is where the developers are. Today, developers are only developing for those who can pay, as I've said. Number two, they cherry pick. They cherry pick. Why? Because they say money is not emotional. You know, they want to go to where the money is going to give them the highest return. Now, let me demonstrate to you. This year alone, I have advertised so many projects. I'm sure you've been seeing them in the newspapers. The first round I advertised was around Nairobi Metropolitan. I had an influx of investors who wanted to take up those homes. Second round, I went to Western Kenya, Kisii, Migori, all those places. I had one investor out of 55 parcels of land that I whatever. Now, Honorable Wandai and the people from that block, you are also Kenyans. You also deserve affordable homes. So if today we say, let's go and leave it to the private sector, what is the private sector going to do? They're only going to focus on where they're going to get a return. So that is why this housing levy gives us the ability to be able to build these homes indiscriminately in every part of our country. And that's why I wrote to every member of parliament and I requested that you give us land in your constituency. Think about it. 200 units, Honorable Wandai. 200 units is average of about 500 million shillings. That is about 5 times your CDF. That means there's going to be so many jobs back at home. There will be lots of industries. Your local hardwares are going to thrive. So, Chair, that's the reason why we need to do something on the supply side, because investors will only focus on those who can afford. On the demand side, though, on the other hand, we talk about low incomes. So the buyers, they lack adequate funding. They do not qualify for mortgages. They walk to a bank and the bank will look at them and tell them, listen, you don't qualify, period. The existing mortgages are too costly. Chair, in this high rising interest regime, I'm sure most of you have got a mortgage. Some of your mortgages have reached 18-20% now as we speak. This government is committing through this housing levy to give every Kenyan who wants, because it is not designed for certain people, it's for every Kenyan. If in social housing, we'll give you a house at 3%, fixed. Fixed until you finish paying, or Jesus comes, whichever comes first. Number two, if you're in affordable housing, we'll give you fixed at 6% for up to 30 years for you to pay. If you are in market, because majority of the working class are in that market bracket, you're not also forgotten. We're giving you 9% fixed. That is half of what you're paying today in the market. And that has been made possible because of this levy. Because the levy is giving us scale, is giving us cheap funding that we are able to advance to Kenyans. So, Chair, this figure here, I'm just going to say it is the pooling of money from yourself, myself. We bring it together in a fund, and then we are able to give the developer an offtake, so that now the developer does not have to say, this Juakali artisan or that Mama Mboga cannot afford. What they see, they don't see Mama Mboga, they see the fund. Because the fund will give them a guaranteed offtake. That if you build these houses, according to the contract, we will offtake those units. That's what that slide says in many numbers. And this is the summary of what I've said. We have got various models for social housing, that is for people who earn 20,000 and below. Today, if you earn 20,000 and below, you will get a house which will only pay 3,200 on a diminishing number, that is on a depreciating or amortized number. So you start 3,200, and as you go into the future, that figure is going to be coming down. That is for 1 room, 2 rooms is 4,800, 6,400. By the way, Chair, these numbers here are not a thumbsuck. These figures, this is the average rental that is being paid by these people who live in the slums. That's what they pay to the slumlords. Okay? So that is what that slide means. The next slide is now the, this is now for those who are in affordable housing bracket, and that is those who earn 20,000 and 150,000. That is how we define you. You will get a studio unit, if you want to start a package life, for 5,200 shillings only. You get a 2-bedroom house for 10,400, and you get a 3-bedroom house for 15,600 shillings. Chair, those figures are made possible because of this housing levy. And lastly, those who are in the market, there is something for you as well. You will get a much bigger unit with better finishes, and you will be able to get let me get these figures here, 31,300 for a 2-bedroom house, which is quite big, which is 60 square meters, and you'll be able to pay 41,800 for an 80 square meter unit. Chair, there is one more category, which is our folks in the rural areas. If you're in the rural areas, I've got good news for you, is that we will come, we are working with our TVET colleges, with our ABMT centers. Honorable Kalonzo, I have got an ABMT center in Mwingi, where we are putting what we call hydroform machines. And these hydroform machines, they use what is called stabilized soil blocks. Okay, so we can be able to get as many young people to come. And for every block they make, we will pay them 3 shillings. And we will use those blocks to convert the mud houses into decent homes. And if you do that, we'll also be able to give you a facility which you will be paying for a period of time, and it is going to be at 6% if you want to build your rural home. And if you're in the social housing category, you still get it at 3%. So there is something for everybody in this affordable housing agenda. Chair, I really thank you for giving me enough time to prosecute this issue, and I will be ready for any questions. Thank you.
We thank you so much, Wanahinga. By the way, in Mwingi we had Mwingi women are themselves building their own houses. No hydroform, good plans. You have plans. Who is the next one?
Rogo.
And Rogo.
They have come from after the CS National Treasury.
Oh, yeah.
They will be telling us what plans they have.
They want to come after Juguna or Juguna first?
After Njuguna, because they need to hear him.
I think so.
Yes.
Prof.
But,
I think everybody is really looking for you. They want to hear. Give a bit of comfort like we did to Hinga.
It should be the last. Chair.
I think Kenyans need a bit of comfort.
Yes,
Chair,
Yes.
I thought it could be the last after the rest are finished, then he wraps up.
Well, what do you feel? Either way.
Okay, Chairman, with the wrapping up.
Wrapping up.
Yes.
Okay. So we
It
go to Bill.
will all come to you. So, Rugo and Bilo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by saying my views are mine, not the government of Kenya. I don't represent any particular group, but I believe that some of the views I've expressed here do resonate with the people of Kenya. So I'll be speaking on my own capacity, and I will restrict myself to the areas that have been asked to talk about in the few minutes. I think the first time we should probably talk about the state of the economy in general, the way I see it. And I think in the notes I have shared very briefly, I have explained what I think the status of the economy is. But because I think some of the members here don't have, I'll just highlight that particular paragraph, and then on the other side, just pick 1 or 2 items on that. I think it's not going to be after. I think they are not shared.
Okay, the secretaries here, I think I can see them getting ready to circulate.
Okay.
But you can proceed since we've got them.
Okay, Chair, I think the most important thing is first to agree on what is the problem. Do we have a problem on the economy? Once we are agreed on that, then we can, of course, look at the solutions. And the solutions we can always agree. We don't necessarily have to agree on what is the best way of resolving it. But I think on the issue of the economy, my take is that this economy is on a drip. It's unstable. And the prognosis of this economy is not rosy. Where we are going, unemployment, I agree with you, is at the highest in the region. And we all know, all Kenyans will tell you that high cost of living has defined our dignity. People are living in a way that really does not represent the, what we should be as people of Kenya. And we are all on loans. It's not only the government. The government's loan of over 11 trillion almost, but look at how Kenya themselves are to loans. The commercial banks reports in the last 1 year will tell you that the loans are almost 4 trillion in businesses that people have, loans that people have taken. Look at the individuals. Police loans alone, the last 1 year is nearly 1 trillion. People have borrowed on digital platforms. That will tell you the situation in which we are. Everything from 1,000 shillings to 500 shillings. That will tell you the situation Kenyans are in. And, but I think for me, the most important thing is the public debt, which remains the elephant in the room. Our problem of this economy is largely because of the huge public debt. This is what is driving our high taxes. This is what is, the enhanced infection risks and the high interest rates. All our challenges seem to be depends on the fact that, we are not paying taxes. But I think in my notes you will see that the average tax revenue as a percentage of GDP, which is the measure that is used globally to see whether people are paying taxes in a country or not, is 17%. And is above the average for Africa, which is 16%. And I can tell you, compare that to Egypt and Ghana, where the ratio is 12.5% and 11.3%. Compare that with Uganda and Tanzania, where it's 11.4 and 11.7%. We are paying taxes. And in fact, the annual tax revenue collected by Kenya government, through KRA, is more than the revenue collected by all the 5 East African countries combined, Mr. Chairman. Until last year, when the shilling depreciated, and because of that, the figures are a bit slightly, marginally lower. But all those years, from the time I was in Parliament, we have always collected more money than all the other East African countries. So, in my assessment, revenue is not the issue. And we'll come to that. Corporation tax, of course, we still are one of the highest. Compare that to countries which are close to us. We are 30%. We are going down, I think Treasury announced. But compared to the most expensive countries, corporation tax in Egypt, 22.5%, Egypt, 28, South Africa, Algeria, 25, Ghana, 25. So, do we need to review our taxes downwards? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Particularly those taxes which affect food, the taxes that affect fuel, industrial raw materials, and construction industry. These are critical. If you want to grow the economy, let us look at how to reduce those taxes down. Mr. Chairman, I want to also talk about the the direct taxes very briefly. And I think the issue, one of them is housing, I've been asked to comment on. I have listened to the PS housing, and I agree with him that, some of those things that he has said. But I don't think anybody is disputing the need for houses. I think the issue that has been labored a lot in this country is that the impact it has on the disposable income of Kenyans at this particular time when the economy is very bad. That is one of the things that we have said. Two, does the government need to build houses? Why don't we let the market do its work? Why is the government getting involved in everything? I'm going to come up with some of the things that the policies that the government has come up with, which really is inimical to the objectives of the market or liberalization. My friend Professor Ndongo is very keen on the issue of markets. But I think in the next few years, as he mentioned, there will be hundreds of billions that will be collected. Probably 300 billion by 2027, 2026. Does the government have the capacity to absorb all that money? The little amount of money that goes to development every year, we average around 500, 600, 700 billion. In the past, 800 billion. Look at our absorption rate, and that is 20 ministries spending money on development. Here we have one government entity that is going to spend 300 billion, 400 billion in the next few years in terms of the inefficiencies and all that. Let us look at it. And people don't necessarily look at the rates. If you say we are offering at 3%, at 6%, look at Fuliza. Look at Hustler Fund. It was at 8%, and we were told at 8%, because Fuliza is at 300%, Kenyans are going to take that 50 million. In the 1 year that Hustler Fund was running, Fuliza has grown from 500 billion. It is now 800 billion they have taken in the last 1 year. And still the rates are higher. 2 months ago, they launched the business Fuliza. In 2 months, Kenyans have taken up 6 billion. So sometimes it's not just the rate. There are other factors that also determine, that are also playing, when Kenyans are looking at these things. I've said levies is one of the major challenges that we need. We have hundreds of levies between the counties and national governments that we need to deal with. Some of the levies that are being collected are not used for the purpose for which they have been set. And a good example is the railway development levy. We have been collecting that money from 2013, Mr. Chairman. My own workings, the total we have collected of railway development levy is in excess of 300 billion. In fact, in the last 2 years, it's only this year that we reduced the percentage to 1.5%, and the amount expected to be collected will be 36 billion. But it has always, in the last 3-4 years, it has averaged around 30 to 40 billion. If 300 billion was collected as railway development levy, it would have cleared the SGR loan by now. Ask Treasury where that money is. And there are many levies like that. KEBS is collecting levies. Everybody is collecting levies. On petroleum alone, we have 9 different levies. Most of these levies are not really benefiting. I am in industry of food. We charge, in the last 3 years, we have been collecting 2% levy for all imports of crude palm oil, Mr. Chairman, and all related, seed oils and crops, similar, those kind of things. It's a huge amount of money. Is it being used to develop seed crops in this country? It's not. You see, under the name levy, Treasury has created so much opportunity of collecting taxes, and that money is all swept into consolidated fund. And so it becomes a fund, and these are all costs. So when you look at the cost of production, when you find this thing is costing you 200 shillings, all these things are included, because people are paying railway levy on it, they're paying this levy, that levy. And then the county governments are left doing worse, because for businesses, there are many others again that are being collected. Now, on the cost of running government, Mr. Chairman, I've been asked to comment on that also. I think it starts with the budget. The budget deficit problem is one of the single biggest problems we have had in the last decade. When we came to power in 2013, our budget deficit was 4.2%, 2012. But in the 10 years, it has averaged 9%, Mr. Chairman. And unless we deal with rationalization of public expenditure, Mr. Chairman, we will never address the issue of debt and consequently all the other challenges that fall from the economy. That is our biggest problem. The issue is not revenue, the issue is spending, that is the challenge we have. For example, this year, when we think that this country has got serious problems, we increased expenditure from 3.3 trillion to now 3.98, almost 4 trillion. In a year when we are already facing challenges, our revenues are going down, the KRA is not able to collect it. Already in the budget policy, we have said, I think the government has said in the budget policy medium term, for the next 5 years, they expect to collect 5 trillion in new loans. I think that figure is going to be significantly higher, Mr. Chairman, if this appetite for spending continues. The control of budget was here recently. I think her office is one of the problems we have in this country. When Parliament approves budget, and then you come around, you go to a government ministry, Mr. Chairman, they don't have money to buy photocopy paper. And it has been voted for by Parliament. Money has been voted, appropriations have been passed. Exchequer release must be asked by the appropriation. So there's no reason why a program or an activity for which a budget has been made and appropriation has been voted does not have money to run throughout the year. And yet the entire money voted 3.9 later will be shown as having been spent. And all those appropriations and releases are approved by the control of budget. So I think Treasury, with due respect to my good professor friend here, Parliament has approved appropriations, but Treasury has abandoned them, ignores them with abandon. That is, let me put it that way. I'm sure he will tell me off, he's my friend, so I will welcome him. Now, so we are in a debt trap, Mr. Chairman. We are simply rolling over debt for lack of ability to pay, or taking a new loan to pay the previous loan, all these things. But let me say that the continued borrowing by the government, as if it is business as usual, or because we have a rapport with IMF, is dangerous. It's dangerous, Mr. Chairman. And I think government must really look at what they are doing and say, let us live within our means. We cannot continue, on that path. It's going to be dangerous. Okay, then the other issue I've been asked, the cost of government, again, is misplaced priorities. That is our Achilles heel, misplaced priorities. And I want to talk about the housing fund in this regard. Do you really need to build houses, Mr. Hinga, for the people of Kenya? Or are you going to, would it not have been better if we look at our priorities to spend that money to build the 10,000 classrooms that the CPC requires and the schools are struggling? Is it not better to spend part of that money to give to help so that they can finance students to pay their school fees? Is it not better to spend that money, give to Ministry of Education so that they can send the capitation for schools? I mean, where are our priorities in government? That is where our challenge is always. Misplaced priorities. And so I want to conclude by talking about the policies. And this, I want to really urge those of you in Parliament who are here and also the government, policies of the government. There seems to be a rush in this particular administration to change the existing government policies. And I think it's at a price to Kenyans. And I'll give those examples of that. Those examples. The numerous attempts to change policy and legislative framework in various sectors in the short term is proven to be an economic burden to the taxpayers and to the cost of living. The housing fund, I'll give you an example. The NHIF restructuring, the CPC, the Hustler Fund, Maisha Number, New Health Funding Structure, G2G Petroleum Deal. I'll comment about that later. This reform, that reform. I think we need to do these things over the medium and long term. That's what I think, Mr. Chairman. I think trying to do so many things, changing many things in the short term is going to be at a price. We end up borrowing money, we'll end up taxing Kenyans, we'll make the situation worse for the people of Kenya. I think and I'm lucky today to see my friend Jeff is here and he talked about it. in September 2013, and I remember because I was in the Senate, in September 2013, Mr. Jekyll was the cabinet minister for energy. And he did announce, I remember, that we will have our output of power increased to 5,000 megawatts. And he said the target is within 3 years. And most of that was going to come from geothermal. And in fact, at that time, the discussion was, do we have the demand for all that power? That was the discussion. The potential for geothermal in this country, from what the ministry has been announcing over the years, is up to 10,000 megawatts. This is one of the greenest energy, clean, and it's cheaper than all these others. Mr. Chairman, 10 years later, that dream has not been realized. My worry is 5 years from today, we'll be sitting on the same table discussing about the cost of power. We have said, let us finance Kenya Power. Kenya Power is being financed by Kenyans. I actually, these days, I refer to it as a criminal enterprise because we support them on exchange. They bill you to recover the loss of exchange. If the shilling changes today, the dollar changes, you are paid for it. Inflation changes, you pay for it. Why would that company be making loss? Why would that company be making loss? Perennially. And we are told, we have to support it. I run a small enterprise, Mr. Chairman. Last year, June, we were paying 3 million shillings electricity bill. Last month, we paid 6.1 million. The same capacity consumption. So you can't develop a country if your cost of energy.
Is that monthly?
Yes, man.
Okay.
You can never develop a country if the cost of energy. It's something like that. So I think, with all with respect to Mr. Chairman, unless we deal with the issue of power, we cannot talk of developing this country forward. When the power was reliable, and it was cheap, and it was available, Kenya was a powerhouse for manufacturing. The whole of Eastern Africa was dependent on Kenya. Today, our manufacturing is gone. It's not only contracting. There's an exodus over the last 10, 15 years by many companies. People have moved to where the cost of production is cheaper. Because cost of production is the main thing. You can't compete. If my water is going to be, every time you're thinking of manufacturing, you're thinking of how much is it going to cost. Will I be able to sell? So that's the challenge. And energy is one of the largest, the main component. Plus, of course, the many regulatory and other challenges that we have. So I think, Mr. Chairman, let me leave it and then we'll deal with questions. So, in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you're going to comment on the G2G, you need to understand that.
Oh, yes, I was, once upon a time, as the chairman said, was in petroleum. I left 5 years ago. But let me say this.